Well, welcome everybody to the employer panel being called What Are Employers Looking For Anyway? That's surrounding the international professionals and public servants. We're so glad you're here. Thank you to our panelists for being here tonight. We're very excited to have you. What we will do is I have some questions prepared for you all, and we don't have to go in order, but feel free to make any comments you'd like. Students, you are welcome to utilize the chat space and to ask questions, or you can just turn your screen on and jump right in. So this is very laid back. I will be, just to let you know, I will be jumping off a few minutes early because we have another panel that starts at 7 o'clock. So Howard will stay on while I get the other panel started. So with that, I was hoping that we could just go around and tell us a little bit about you. Maybe if you can, your major and what you're currently doing now. So Chelsea, you're the first on my screen, so I'll have you go first. Please.
Sure. Thanks, Kim, and nice to see everyone. My name is Chelsea Mertz. I'm a KU grad from 2010, so it's been a little while, but not too long. I was a political science major while I was there, and I now work in Washington, D.C. for a nonprofit, a non-governmental organization that does advocacy with the World Bank around sexual and reproductive health and rights for certain countries that we work with, predominantly in like Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America.
Good. Peter.
Kim, Howard, thanks so much for having me. And to all you students, thanks for joining. I went to Benedictine College, that's up in the northeast corner of Kansas, and I studied political science. These days I'm in Topeka and I work at the Kansas Health Institute, and that's a non-governmental, nonprofit research organization that primarily focuses on doing research and educational information for legislators. So we don't have any sort of advocacy role, but we try to pride ourselves on high quality research and kind of timely information to help as legislators make the difficult decisions that they have to.
Excellent. Okay, I'd like to ask, think back when you first got that very first job, and maybe you could tell us how you got that job, and then any advice that you might have for students who are searching in your areas or within public service.
I'm happy to go first, but I have a slightly different initial job post-graduation. I joined the Peace Corps and was actually applying for the Peace Corps during my senior year at KU. And I left within a month of my graduation from KU, and I moved to Malawi with the Peace Corps and was a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years. So I was going through all those processes during my senior year, the interview process, the application process, and wrapping up all my time at KU while also planning to move abroad for a couple of years. So slightly different. So happy to answer questions on that later. But
what did, if you wouldn't mind, what was that experience like for you, and would you recommend it for someone who's going into any kind of international work or public service work?
Yes, I highly recommend it. I think Peace Corps has been it kind of turned my eyes onto it in KU with some like international exposure and study abroad and some of the volunteer work I was doing at the time. And then Peace Corps has since been the most formative experience going forward, or what kind of set me on the path of working internationally, working with like women's health and rights. That really kind of opened all the doors for that. And especially for people that are interested in kind of living and working abroad, but kind of not entirely sure what that would look like and want to try to build the skills. Peace was a very good aspect for that, especially post-undergrad where you haven't necessarily you don't have graduate skills yet, or you don't, you're just kind of like still trying to think about what the next step might look like. Peace Corps is a very good avenue for that.
Excellent. Thanks. Peter.
So so when I was studying political science, my focus was international relations, and my hope was to go into the diplomatic corps. So I don't know if any of you have looked into that, have looked into the FSOT exam, one of the most difficult federal exams to go into working as in various roles in a consulate or an embassy. And so that was what I was focused on. But my last semester, um, I realized I needed to get some sort of experience. So I started by chance. I just reached out to an alumni who I'd met by chance one time. And I just said, hey, I'm looking for any advice you might be able to give me. Any advice on how you got started, what opportunities I could maybe look for and gain an internship. And then I mentioned it to a professor who followed up with him. And a week later, I had an offer for an internship in the governor's office. So that wasn't exactly a first job, but that allowed me to get my foot in the door. And I went 3 days a week to an hour commute to Topeka. And I really just kind of threw myself into that. And after a month, they asked if I'd be interested in coming on board full time as a policy analyst upon graduation. So my last final was on a Tuesday, and my first day of work full time was a Wednesday. So I went straight from school into my first full time job, um, into the middle of a gubernatorial transition working under Governor Collier, and it was a really amazing experience. And it wasn't what I'd intended. It wasn't what I'd set my target on. I had no real knowledge of domestic policy or state politics, but I really loved the opportunity and have kind of fallen in love with that.
Excellent. Um, Let me ask, you both had really unique experiences coming out of college. Um, what what advice would you have for students who are beginning their job search? Especially now during the pandemic, maybe you could give us an idea of what the employer or what job kind of availability is, what the overall industry is like right now for hiring in these kinds of roles, and what you might suggest for these students.
So I've got a couple different thoughts on that. At least some of the sort of jobs I've seen, and as friends of mine are actually applying for jobs right now, I think being able to discuss your experiences, whether that's in the classroom or through like volunteer or like summer jobs and things like that, it's being able to not only discuss your experience, but also outline how those experiences can prepare you for other sort of work. So whether that's you have written a number of papers and have done so quickly and can like analyze information and write reports, like that is a very valuable, tangible skill. And it's one of those things where you don't necessarily think about like, oh, I have to write another paper. This is like, oh, this seems overwhelming. But like, if you think about it in a way that that is a very valuable asset in terms of if you're wanting to go into sort of like analytical role or do even like in my sort of work that's advocacy, we do a lot of work, reporting, assessments, things like that. So being able to qualify and be able to translate experiences, that is immensely helpful. That's kind of on the one side. And I think some kind of other hard skills, and that you can also mention, however you may have like gathered those. So whether that's if you're taking a foreign language class, so you can speak French or Spanish at like an intermediate level or advanced level or something like that, that always looks good, especially if you're wanting to work internationally. And things like coding or data analysis, things like skills like that are also incredibly helpful at this point in time. So whether you've done it in a classroom or even if you've had some sort of internship or volunteer experience where you're learning to code data, do data analysis, use things like R or other kind of systems like that, those are very valuable skills, no matter how you obtain them, but being able to talk about them and how you are able to utilize those within your work.
Very good. It seems like you're talking about having both a combination of kind of hard skills and soft skills as well, which is really important. And we talk about that a lot with students. Peter, do you have anything you could add?
I absolutely want to echo that. That's all excellent advice. And then I'll just add a couple of other thoughts in addition to that, which are I've really found that nothing has mattered as much in my career trajectory as relationships. Um, that was how I got my first opportunity, was not being afraid to follow up with someone I'd met one time who gave me their card, and to follow up, with a professional, respectful email, but to really try to make sure that you're people focused, build relationships, and really try to learn from anyone you can starting out, asking for advice, asking where you can grow, develop. And then something else that I've learned in my first couple jobs is just how important working with those first people that you interact with, especially your supervisor, um, whether that's in a volunteer role or your first job. But building a mentorship relationship can make a world of difference. And so I would really encourage you to think about who are those mentors, whether professors, people who you've worked for, people who have overseen extracurricular activities. And don't be afraid to go to them to ask them what advice they have for you. And I think after that, sometimes it's going to people, and in addition to showing your hard skills and soft skills, also show that you're willing to hustle, that you're willing to adapt, especially under the strange times that we're in, where the question is, are we returning to offices, or what's going to be virtual? And just showing that you're willing to adapt to what's needed early on, and kind of hustle now, to save yourself time later. So that's what I'd like to add on. But absolutely, I also want to echo what Chelsea said.
And Peter, you made a comment that you said you really didn't know much about, what did you say, domestic
I'm on the call.
policies and so forth. I think there's a lot of students that will look at a job description and it is scary for them because they think, oh, I don't know this or I don't know that. And they are hesitant to apply, and they see qualifications and prefer to qualifications and believe that if I don't have all of those, I'm not an eligible candidate. Or they don't see how some of the experiences they have in their classroom or in internships or their jobs translate into that. Could you comment a little bit about that? What you think about not having that experience, but being able to work in those roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been asked a few times since graduation what classes were most helpful for me in going into politics, and now a role that has a component of legislative monitoring and data analysis. And oddly enough, the classes that I always go back to are classic literature classes, because I had to read 500 to 600 pages a week in often difficult writing styles, anything from, kind of late Victorian English to just really technical uh, transcripts. And I had to be able to give a big picture and a really detailed summary of what I'd read. No experience through college has helped me more than those two, which is not what I thought. I thought it would all come down to what my experiences were. But when I can go to someone who's looking to hire, or I can look at a job description and say, what they want to know is they want somebody who's willing to put in the work to gather information, understand it, and then summarize it back to someone. You'd be amazed how many jobs can be boiled down to that process. And just being able to understand, I have those skills. Yeah, I haven't worked in politics before I got that internship, or I haven't ever done, heavy data work, but just understanding, being able to analyze a volume of information and kind of speak right about that articulately later is really a huge thing. So don't be afraid to kind of understand what skills you possess that aren't literally going to match up with the job description you're reading.
That's really, I've never thought about having those literature courses as being so helpful. And I'm assuming, I can't imagine there's really long documents in government politics. I've never heard of such a thing. um, that's great advice. Chelsea, can you add anything to that, or is there that you would?
Yeah, actually, when Peter said that, that really sort of resonated with me as well. Just, I think the classes that have always prepared me the most have been the ones where I've had to read large amounts, often a book a week, and be able to not only discuss it, summarize it, but be able to write something about it very quickly. So kind of quickly synthesize information and large amounts of information. So I've had a variety of classes that fit that bill, that whether that's literature or sociology or political science classes, but any sort of class that does that has always kind of ticks the box in terms of like, it's been very helpful for me in synthesizing information going forward.
It's good to know if the students that a lot of this of you all, I'm sure you have what, probably 4 months left until graduation, and you're wondering, well, great, I can't really enroll in a literature class right now, or my schedule's all full. What other things can students do now? I mean, we're obviously in a global pandemic, and internships are a little more rare than they were a year ago. But what kinds of things do you think they could do now until graduation that might help them prepare for entering the workforce, and particularly in your fields?
And can I add just an addendum to
Please.
that? And Anne is here.
Oh,
And so we'll introduce her in a second. There's Anne. Hey, Anne,
hi, Anne.
can you hear us?
She's on mute.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Maybe can we pause, Kim, and let Anne introduce herself for a second?
Absolutely,
So Anne,
please,
I'm
Anne.
sorry.
Hi.
I gave Anne the wrong passcode, and so that was the issue there. My message left off as 0, so I apologize. That's my fault. So Anne, we just started with introducing ourselves and sharing a little bit about what our academic background was, particularly KU, and what you do now.
Great. Thanks, Howard, so much for inviting me to the meeting. And we're all dealing with technical challenges, so no worries. I'm sorry that I can't join you from my laptop, having a little bit of difficulty, but hopefully you all can hear me just fine from my phone. We got to roll with the punches and use the technology that we've got. So thanks for inviting me to this conversation. I was a KU graduate in the communication studies area with an emphasis in intercultural communication. And, you know, honestly, when I was getting ready to graduate from KU, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't know that there were, you know, such things in, you know, the global sphere for all these different careers. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, so just really didn't have a sense of all of that. But one of the things that, you know, I did my senior year was go to a lot of career fairs. So obviously talk to a lot of employers, pick up a lot of materials, things like that. And one of the things that I did was I happened to pick up a pamphlet on the Peace Corps. And, you know, just kept walking, didn't even talk to anyone. And then several weeks later, when I was looking through those materials, I started to read about what the Peace Corps was. And honestly, it felt like it was speaking to me. It was the opportunity to go to another country, to work with other cultures, to teach and to learn a new language. So all of those things sounded really interesting to me, and really like what the next step that I wanted to take was. So I applied into the Peace Corps and I got in, and I was sent to Cameroon, which is in Central West Africa, for my first assignment, which was a 2.5-year assignment as a health volunteer. And that is really what got me started on the trajectory in global health. And so I've been doing that for the past almost 19 years now. Currently, I work at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation based in Seattle. And my role there is really managing a series of investments for Bill and Melinda Gates, specifically in the area of neglected tropical diseases. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is really work with either country partners or implementing partners or other governments, any number of stakeholders on investments and grants that we have given to them about specifically neglected tropical diseases. And I've been doing that for a number of years. You know, after Peace Corps, I worked a little bit in the US at different organizations, worked abroad a few more times, then went to grad school, and then came out and really started my focus in neglected tropical diseases. So it's been a wonderful trajectory KU really gave me a great foundation for that start. And one of the things, you know, I noted some of the earlier questions were about what kind of advice would you give students? And one of the things that I would really, really encourage students to do early on is find a good mentor. Somebody that can be that link to you. And, you know, because many of you don't have a lot of work experience, it could be somebody at KU like a professor or like an advisor or somebody that you work with on campus that could really help to guide you. And I had a great business communications professor at KU that really helped me to, you know, perfect my resume, you know, letters that I was writing, provided recommendations early on when I didn't have anyone else to provide recommendations. And still to this day, almost 20 years later, I'm still in contact with her and keep her updated on the different things that I'm doing. So a mentor can really be that person who acts as a sounding board, you know, a reviewer for your materials, and then provide recommendations. And really, you know, I think one of the other panelists mentioned that relationships are so key. And that is one part of being a mentor and a mentee, is keeping that relationship. And keeping it going so that, you know, that person watches you as you go on from experience to experience and helps you build that, you know, your credentials up in your area. The other thing I wanted to just mention was, you know, as young people, I would really encourage folks to seek global opportunities and global experience wherever you can. I mean, I understand that now we're in a pandemic, so Peace Corps is not even totally functional right now, but I think that they will be sending volunteers back into the field. But even if it's with, you know, your church or your community organization, or any opportunity that you can use to either learn a language or work with diverse populations, that's going to help set you apart from candidates to really be able to show experience in working with global populations. So just wanted to offer a couple of those little nuggets, and hopefully that was enough of my background to give people a sense of where I'm at.
That was outstanding. Want to introduce you to Peter and Chelsea, your co-panelists. And I'm not sure I knew this when I asked you both, but Chelsea was also in the Peace Corps. So that's great synergy. I want to follow up just two things I put in the chat, students, and some students we can see, and some students have their cameras off. Number one, there is some information about Peace Corps application, and I'm not sure, as Ann suggested, I'm not sure where they are in terms of pandemic and next class, recruiting class or whatever. But there is a website for Peace Corps at KU. I put that in the chat. And then also Peter brought this up, and Chelsea and Ann followed. If you don't know about KU Mentoring, KU Mentoring is a platform where we're trying to let students connect directly with alumni to build those relationships, build their network, build that mentoring relationship. We will probably crest 8,000 users there this month. So students, if you're not on, it probably takes 10 minutes to make a profile. You should be really intentional with your profile. But folks like Chelsea and Ann and nearly 5,000 alums are on there now, and it's growing every day. So if you haven't been on KU Mentoring, it's a really great place. It's almost like, I sometimes describe it as a localized Jayhawk LinkedIn. So I think we got, and Kim just put in a note about career fairs coming up. I think Chelsea, you had mentioned career
Yeah,
fairs.
you had mentioned the career fairs, Chelsea, and I just want to let you know that because you had mentioned you went around and talked to people to get an idea of what was out there. And we have a career fair coming up on the 17th of February, and you will have an opportunity to meet directly and actually schedule times with quite a few different employers on Zoom. So take advantage of that. The information's on the bootcamp site, and I just sent you the link as well. So anyway, did you have something else, Howard, you wanted to mention?
I interrupted a question before, and I think the question had to do, we were talking about
what they can do now.
Yeah, and I was going to just tap into that and say, also outside of your classwork, when you were in school at KU or Benedictine, what were there social organizations you were a part of, or involvement opportunities that you did at any time while you were in school that were also helpful for building those skills that we talked about? I'll just tack that on. Also want to hear about your experience, what you did when you were in school.
Great. Well, a couple of quick thoughts. As far as what I did that was helpful, I was involved in a whole bunch of, clubs, student government, all that. But the thing that I think has left it most of an impression was I ended up just working as a groundskeeper over summers, and then into semesters I would get up at, some if it snowed, I'd be up at 4:30 shoveling the sidewalks before class so students could get there. Um, and it was something I didn't really think of until later. Um, and I found out that that's actually learning how to just, I guess, look at some of your experiences, look back at what you've been involved in, and understand that there are things that employers are going to see more value in than just what looks good on paper. For instance, I think I can tell people I was in student government, and employers are usually less interested in that than the fact that I say I would go and work, a couple few hours before class every morning. Um, so that's one thing you can do right now is look back at some of your experiences that aren't necessarily, you're going to have all the ones that immediately come to mind, things that you've done specifically in preparation, but go back, look at what jobs have you had, what events have you gone to, what sort of um, speakers have you listened to that may come into play in a way that you didn't expect. And then the other quick thing I'll say that you can do right now that I kind of wish I had done a little earlier is think back to one or two essays that you've done that you're really proud of, and then clean them up. Go back in, find the notes that were left on it, and get a really good writing sample just to have available, so that at any moment if someone says, "Do you have a writing sample?" you know exactly, here's something I'm proud of. I feel good about it. And it really showcases what I'm proud of. And if you don't have something from your classwork that jumps to mind, well, then go out and write something specifically that you're interested in that you can really get behind and say, this is what I'm capable of. And I think that that can be really helpful. And a lot of employers will ask for writing samples. So that's something that you can do now to really prepare.
Excellent. That's good to know. So in your experiences, you have been asked to bring a writing sample in to just show your thought process, your writing ability, your ability to communicate that you talked about.
Yeah, and most employers will ask for a cover letter and a resume. So, and I'm sure that you'll cover that in the next couple weeks. But I usually send in whatever email or whenever I submit my cover letter and resume, I also drop in a note to say I'd also be happy to provide references or writing samples. And that can make a difference just because people are looking for what sets you apart from other applicants, and being proactive to say, I have references, I have writing samples can just give you a little bit of extra edge and make you look that much more prepared.
One thing I wanted to that was touched upon, and I think Anne, you mentioned this, that you had gone to grad school, and I think a lot of students think that right after, if they want to go into any of these kinds of lines of work, they have to go directly go get a graduate degree to get in. Talk to us a little bit about that and your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. So that's actually one point I wanted to raise was I really encourage students when I talk to them about their careers to not pursue graduate school right after undergraduate. For me, it was really important to go out and actually get some experience working in the area that I thought that I wanted to pursue, to kind of figure out what I would want to really do more specifically and what my focus would be. Grad school is a big investment of time and money. And before taking that step into grad school, you should be really certain and sure about what you want to specialize in. So for me, once I graduated from KU and I got a couple years of international experience, then had some domestic experience, then went back and did another a fellowship in India and got another international sort of organization, behind me, then I really understood the type of work and the type of additional study that I wanted to do, that would help me set me apart. And for me, I went to Brandeis for graduate school, and I got my Master's of Science in International Health Policy and Management. And that's a mouthful, but it's a really specific degree, because that's what, after working in the field for, some 6 or 7 years, that's what I knew that I wanted to do. And so I did sort of an accelerated program. It was a 1-year program because I already had a lot of field work experience. I was able to do it in 1 year. And then that's what really prepared me to get more specifically into the area that I'm in now, which is management and implementation of neglected tropical disease programs. So for me, I always encourage students, unless you are like super certain and you've had some experience before and you know what you want to do in grad school, hold off on that. It's a really big investment. And so I would say, get a little bit of work experience, get your feet wet, get out there and talk to people, and understand what you would want to specialize in before just jumping straight into another academic experience.
That's excellent.
May I actually piggyback on that too?
Please do.
100% agree with Anne, because that was much my same experience. I had a few years in between undergrad. Part of that was Peace Corps, part of that was domestic experience, actually at the Kansas Health Institute, where Peter is now, before going to graduate school. But it was those sort of experiences that really solidified for me what I wanted to do and what sort of program I wanted to study in graduate school. It also helped me to identify scholarships and funding opportunities, to make sure I wasn't going to be stuck with a lot of student debt for grad school, because that's a lot of people take that on, as Anne mentioned. So it helped me to kind of figure out how I could possibly fund grad school, and the combination of things I would need to do, and the time to also pursue those, and gather more experience that not only informed like the sort of fellowship and having that kind of practicum level experience, but it also made my dissertation in graduate school that much easier to write, because I had the experience to base it off of going into it. Very, very important and great advice.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Awesome. Thank you so much. First, I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. I really appreciate everything you've said so far. It's been pretty useful for me, at least. But I just wanted to ask, so given that right now we're in, the pandemic, it's kind of difficult to get any sort of shadowing experience or any sort of, I guess kind of what you're saying, any trial before you jump fully into something or dedicate lots of time and energy and money into a specific job or outlook. So I was just wondering if you guys have any recommendations as far as trying to get the most real view or the best type of trial run of a job as possible without being able to necessarily shadow someone in their workplace.
Yeah, if I could jump in on that one, that's a great question and really important. One of the things that I would suggest is to try to get some volunteer experience when you can. That's one thing that I did, and use your passion, whatever it is, whether it's whatever area that you're interested in, whether it's the environment or health or any number of things, try to find a volunteer experience that matches up with that. And, for me, as a young person, I really felt so drawn to the HIV and AIDS cause. I didn't even know anyone that had been affected by it, but for some reason it really, spoke to me. So when I was at KU, I wanted to figure out, how can I be involved here in Lawrence, Kansas, when, I don't have any skills and I don't know what I'm doing. And one of the things that I did was I did outreach with the Douglas County AIDS Project. I'm not sure if they still exist now, but, I went to them and, talked about that I had this interest, and was there anything that I could do in terms of volunteering my time so that I could start to learn from folks at that organization. And, it was stuff that, at now looking back, seemed very unimportant to me, but really helped me a lot. It was stuffing envelopes, answering the phone. I'm sure, at this point in time, those type of organizations have gone more to virtual work, but it really helped to build some experience in that area. And when I was doing my Peace Corps application, I used that volunteer experience to really set me apart and say that, yes, I did have some experience working with HIV and AIDS organizations. And that's really what put my application over the edge. And the reason that I was sent to West Africa at the time, because they were sending all their volunteers who had an interest in working with the issue of HIV to that area. So for me, I didn't have a strong language behind me, but some of that volunteer experience really, showed my passion for the work, even though it wasn't sort of a paid job. So I would just encourage you that if you have an interest in something, to try to pursue organizations as a volunteer while you have the time at this point.
I think we had a question.
I'd also like to
Please go ahead.
jump in on that.
Please.
Sorry. My other advice in terms of how you can kind of find some of that shadow experience or get a real take on something is like informational interviews with people. So kind of similar to, but a little bit different from like having a mentor, the networking is anytime I've kind of either looked for new jobs or even before Peace Corps, I reached out to a few people who I already known had been in Peace Corps, and I corresponded with them and did like a quick phone chat. And even now when I'm in DC, before I had the job I had now, I'd reached out to other people in similar lines of work and just asked, like, can we get a cup of coffee? Or do you have time for a virtual, like, phone call or FaceTime or something for a little bit, especially when I wasn't in the same city, to just ask them some candid questions like, how do you like it? What do you recommend? Is this a good place to work? Or what are the skills this place is looking for? They can be like kind of informal in that way. You can just take like 30 minutes, 45 minutes and ask somebody who's already in that role that isn't like, interviewing you for the job, but just to kind of ask some of those like basic questions and get a realer understanding of what that sort of work or area, what it's like.
Hey, Kim, can I jump in real quick? Just following up this awesome
Peter was going to say
advice.
something.
Yeah, Haley has a question,
Okay.
but I want to draw attention to Kim put the volunteer page, which includes a database of volunteer opportunities, in the chat. And Ann, I checked into the Douglas County AIDS Project, and it looks like their work was subsumed by the Heartland Community Health Center about 5 years ago. But it looks like the work is carrying on within that space. But Haley's going to ask a question. But Peter, real quick, does KIH have any volunteering opportunities that you know of, or anything the students might look at there?
That's just what I want to say is really one of the most useful tools you have is your phone. I recently had someone who I'd known kind of around reach out to me. He just shot me a text or gave me a call one day and said, hey, I've got about a month over my, before Christmas, classes let out early. Would you all have anything I could work on during that time? So I connected him and he came on board and just helped out with a couple projects, and he's been great. Now we're bringing him on as an intern. And so there are often opportunities here. We kind of, even if we don't have something posted, you can always, we can see if we would have something that might be a good fit. But whether it's our organization or another one, sometimes just reaching out to say exactly what Chelsea said. Find someone and just ask, hey, could we talk for an hour? And in that sense, moving virtually is almost an advantage because people are so used to it now. You don't have to be in the same place to grab coffee with someone. You can say, can we do an hour coffee break over Zoom and just ask them questions about their job? Or if you know of someone at an organization that's kind of interesting, say, hey, I've got just this little bit of time. Is there anything that you all could use some help on? And just being that proactive, reaching out can make a huge difference. So.
I'm going to follow up with that, Peter, but I want to get to Haley's question first, and then I'll come back and I want to ask a follow-up question on that. Haley, what's your question?
Perfect. My question was, in the future, I kind of hope to work internationally. However, I'm finding it kind of difficult being in Lawrence. A lot of my connections have not had international experience. I was wondering kind of how did you make those connections, or did they solely come from working in the Peace Corps and that's how you made more abroad connections?
Chelsea, do you want to go or should I jump in?
Go for it.
Okay. Great. So I understand the challenge of creating some of those connections. And it is challenging, especially if you don't have those at your fingertips. And so the way that it happened for me is that it was really through that first volunteer experience abroad, where I met a lot of people just by the nature of living in a different country who had all kinds of different work experience. And it really exposed me to the world of international development and global health, where I didn't even know that these jobs really existed before. So that's kind of where I started to make some connections. But once you make those connections, and here's where building relationships comes in again, once you leave an experience, you still have to maintain some of those relationships. And so, by nature of other volunteers and people that I had come across through my work in Cameroon, that's how I started building up a network of people abroad who were doing many different things. And it kind of started to expose me to the possibilities of different types of work. So I think, while you're in Lawrence right now and can't do that necessarily, I think the idea and the suggestion of informational interviews that was given and volunteer opportunities and trying to get a little bit outside of the KU network to just expose yourself to other opportunities is where you have to start, especially in a time of pandemic where you're not going to be able to necessarily travel to some of these places to start. But I mean, I would just offer that as what my road was. And then, using the idea of informational interviews or reaching out for volunteer opportunities locally to try to build a network. You have to start somewhere.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Haley. You had mentioned, both of you, and I think all three of you have mentioned about reaching out to people. I know, Anne, you talked about mentoring and then networking with Peter, the people that you know. I think it's really a nerve-wracking thing for soon-to-be recent grads to just reach out blindly like that. Or what did they say? What did they say in these emails? Do they send an email? Do they pick up the phone? What kinds of recommendations do you have for somebody who might be nervous about networking?
Howard mentioned a few minutes ago about the mentoring network through KU, and I've actually had several students reach out to me through that network and just and provide a little bit of background on who they are and what they're studying and what their area of interest is and why they would be interested in talking to me. And then, we've set up a call, and I've been happy to kind of, talk to them. And especially because it's through that KU connection, then you're more apt to want to, lend some time to someone. I've also had people reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if there's not an immediate connection, I'm usually less likely to want to engage in a conversation. But if it's somebody who's reached out to me because of KU or because of my graduate school or because they know somebody that I know, then I'm much more willing to. But I think you have to enter into that conversation and be very prepared because you're asking for someone's time. And so that's one of the most, scarce resources we have. And so I think that you would really need to make sure that you have a list of questions prepared, a polished way to introduce yourself and introduce your interest. But that's an excellent way to start some of that networking when you kind of don't know where to start. I would say the initial email or outreach is really important to really share who you are and why you're reaching out to them and what you're asking them for.
I'll also jump in on that too. Another way I've kind of gone about some of that early networking is I had one professor at KU, Mary Clater, who I know is still there if anybody happens to be a Mary Clater.
Yeah,
Claterite.
in the Mary Clater family.
Yeah. She was always somebody I would go into her office hours, and she is just this like mental Rolodex of people where she'll be like, oh, like, tell me about your interest, or you tell her about what you're kind of thinking about. And she'll be like, I can name 3 people who either went to that school or are serving in, like, have a job like that or do something like that. And she will like shoot off a quick email and be like, Chelsea's interested in this. I also know you work in this field. Here's both of your contact information. You should reach out. So she was always that kind of like third party who could connect me to a lot of people. And I've kind of tried to emulate some of that now that I'm a bit away from KU and in some of my other networks where I've connected a lot of people in a similar way. So if I meet somebody or someone's come to me and asked that, I'm like, oh, I have somebody who also works in that field or has been on that path, I'm happy to connect you. So it's just kind of like leaning on somebody you know, or if you know somebody who has big networks, like a professor, or maybe it's like a head of an organization that you happen to be working with or somehow involved with, asking them if they have other people that might be helpful to you in the sort of work you're interested in or the field you're interested in.
I just have to say, Chelsea, I think Mary Clater was KU mentoring before we had KU mentoring, just her as an individual with her network. Love Mary Clater.
Want to mention that, and I don't know if any of you have used this in the past when you were back when, but I do want to point out that on Nonprofit Connect, they have a career board there that offers jobs, internships, volunteer opportunities, and sometimes they have international opportunities there. So Haley, you might take a look at that. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations that they look for that. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think what I wanted to ask now is that, and thank you for your information about the networking thing, because I think that is kind of a scary thing for students, and definitely that mentoring platform makes it so much easier to do that. What is one thing that you would like to share about what you love, about what you do, and about the industry in general? And Peter, do you want to go first?
Sure. It's something that you've already heard me say multiple times. It's relationships. It's all about the people. You can have your absolute dream job, and if you can't get along with your coworkers or aren't interested in the end goal of what you're doing, if you're in an organization where your end goal is to help make other people's lives better or to help people, and you lose sight of who these people are, you can really get lost, and it just becomes work. It just becomes stress. So I would say that my favorite thing about my field is that it does have a real person-centered focus. And that's what I love, and that's what makes it easy to go back in every day, is good relationships with coworkers, good relationships with my my supervisor, with anyone that I meet, just being able to really keep people in mind and to see it as a way of meeting people, building those connections, and helping reach people to make their lives better. And I think that's really what has made the difference for me.
I think Kim needs to go to the other panel, so I'll
Yeah,
take over, Kim.
I'm gonna say goodbye. Thank you to all of our fantastic panelists. I hate to leave you. This is so great, but hopefully our paths will cross again soon.
I loved what you said, Peter, that person focus.